The smell hit me first, diesel fuel and fresh-cut apple wood. 6 in the morning and they were pouring concrete on my land. 28 luxury condos, $4.2 million, rising on 47 acres I own, with a clear title going back to 1961 when my grandfather bought this place. The HOA president, Darlene Pritchett, white Lexus, community first vanity plates, drove past yesterday and waved. Like we were neighbors having a polite disagreement about fence height. This wasn't polite. She'd forged permits, bulldozed my grandfather's 80-year-old orchard, and built her retirement cash cow on my property. No permission, no offer, just entitlement with a real estate license. Her grand opening party was in 7 days. My demolition crew was already scheduled. What would you do if you woke up to concrete trucks on your property? Comment below. Where are you watching from? I want to know. HOA corruption is everywhere. My name's Mitch Kowalski. 52, third-generation owner of this land, retired civil engineer who moved back to my grandfather's farmhouse 18 months ago after my wife died. Cancer took 4 years to kill her, and she fought every single day until the end. I came back here to figure out what came next. 47 acres of overgrown pasture, pine forest on the north side, and an apple orchard Grandpa planted in 1943. The place smelled like pine sap and old memories. Grandpa always said, "This land's got plans, Mitch. Just gotta wait for the right ones." I was still waiting. The property sits outside Pinewood Springs, mid-sized mountain town where Californians move to escape traffic, then complain the coffee shops close at 4 p.m. In 2019, a developer built Willow Creek Estates right next to my land. Gated community, 120 homes, HOA fees that could finance a small country. That's where Darlene Pritchett lived. White Lexus, helmet hair, designer athleisure that cost more than my truck, and the kind of smile that made you check your wallet. She was HOA president, which apparently meant unelected dictator with a clipboard. 6 months after I moved back, she found me at Corner Cafe, slid into my booth without asking, introduced herself, and got straight to business. "We're concerned about your property, Mitch. It's become an eyesore, overgrown, attracts coyotes, you understand. Would you consider selling? We'd give you a fair price." I set down my coffee. The mug hit the table with a solid thunk. "It's not for sale." Her smile froze like cheap Botox. "Well, we'll see. Property maintenance codes exist for a reason." 2 weeks later, code enforcement showed up. County inspector named Earl, 70 years old, seen everything twice, walked my land with a clipboard and found absolutely nothing wrong. "Anonymous complaint," he said, apologetic. "Hazardous debris, illegal structures." "Total bull, Mitch. You're fine." I asked who filed it. Earl looked at his boots and said, "Can't say officially, but those fancy gates next door, I'd start there." I let it go. Figured Darlene was flexing small-time power and small-time people eventually get bored. Then I left for 2 weeks in late March. My wife always wanted her ashes scattered in Yellowstone. She loved how the mountains made her feel small in a good way. I stood at an overlook, wind whipping hard enough to sting, and watched her become part of something bigger than both of us. When I got back home, my land looked like a crime scene. Survey stakes everywhere, 43 of them, bright orange tape fluttering along my eastern property line like some kind of invasion force. I called the number on the tags, surveying company out of Denver. The receptionist sounded bored. "Oh, you're Kowalski?" "Yeah, Willow Creek HOA hired us for a boundary dispute." Boundary dispute. I pulled my deed that night, sat under Grandpa's old brass lamp, the one that burned so hot you could fry an egg on the shade, and read every word. Property line was crystal clear. Surveyed in 1961, confirmed in 87, unchanged when I inherited 18 months ago. No dispute, no confusion, no problem except the one Darlene was inventing. I called her. She answered with that honey drip voice. "Oh, Mitch, it's just a formality. Our lawyer found discrepancies in the original plat. Don't make this difficult. Think of the community." I said, "There are no discrepancies. This is my land." She paused, and when she spoke again, the honey was gone. "Well, I suppose that's for the courts to decide. Blessed day." Click. That was 4 months ago. I hired my own surveyor. Cost me $3,200. And he confirmed what I already knew. My land, my boundary, no dispute. I sent Darlene a certified letter with the survey attached. She never responded. 3 weeks of silence, and I figured she'd back down. Then I woke up to the smell of diesel and the sound of my grandfather's orchard being murdered. I walked out there at 6:15 in my bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, genuinely thinking I'd lost my mind. 3 bulldozers, 2 concrete trucks, 30 guys in hard hats moving across my land like they'd always owned it. Morning fog still hung low, and they were already ripping trenches through the pasture where Grandpa taught me to ride. The smell hit me. Torn earth and diesel exhaust, rich and violent. The kind of smell that says money doesn't care about your feelings. I watched a dozer push over an apple tree, roots snapping like gunfire, and something in my chest went cold and sharp. The foreman ignored my shouting. Machinery too loud, or maybe he was paid to be deaf. I found the site trailer, climbed the plywood steps still wet with dew, and walked in without knocking. Randall Pritchett, Darlene's husband, real estate developer, golf course tan, sat at a folding table covered in blueprints. He looked up and smiled like we were old friends. "Mitch, morning. Coffee?" I said, "You're on my land." He didn't even blink. "Actually, check your facts. HOA filed an adverse possession claim 2 weeks ago. This land's been in legal limbo since 1998. We're just rectifying an old error." My jaw tightened. "That's not how adverse possession works. This is criminal trespassing." Randall leaned back, chair creaking. "Then call the cops." "Oh wait, Sheriff Danny Cho? We golf every Thursday. Good luck with that, buddy." I called anyway because I'm stubborn like that. Dispatcher said a deputy would come when available, which is small town code for maybe by Tuesday. 4 hours later, a kid deputy showed up, couldn't have been 30, nervous energy, kept adjusting his belt. I showed him my deed. Randall produced permits claiming the HOA owned disputed land, said construction could proceed with a bond posted during litigation. The deputy looked at both documents, looked at his boots, delivered the line I'd been dreading. "This is civil, sir. You need a lawyer and an injunction." Randall smirked from his trailer doorway, and right there I understood the game. Rich people don't break rules. They just rewrite them faster than you can read and dare you to keep up. I drove straight to county records, brain spinning through everything I knew from my engineering days about property law. Adverse possession kept rattling around in my head. I'd seen it used legitimately once, when a rancher claimed an abandoned road after 30 years of maintenance. But that was 30 years. The legal standard requires open, notorious, continuous use for 20 years minimum in this state. Willow Creek Estates was built in 2019, 5 years ago. Mathematically impossible. But then I remembered something my old boss used to say, "Mitch, in court, the truth is just the starting bid." Filing a bogus claim creates legal fog, clouds the title, delays enforcement, and while you're scrambling to afford lawyers, they keep building. That's the bet, that you'll run out of money before they run out of concrete. The county clerk was a woman named Diane, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of person who's seen every scam twice and believed none of them. She pulled up Darlene's filing, and I watched her face change as she read. "Honey, this paperwork claims the HOA used your land since 2000 for community recreation. Open and notorious." I felt my stomach drop. The HOA didn't exist until 2019. She nodded slowly. "I know. This is faker than a $3 bill, but it's filed. Official until a judge tosses it, and that takes time." She printed 23 pages of lies. Notarized, stamped, perfect forgeries. Cost me $7 for documentation of my own fraud. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry bees. Next morning, I went back with a homemade stop work order. Wasn't legal, but it looked official, and I was too angry to care. Construction crew laughed. One guy, missing his front tooth, said, "Nice try, bud," and went back to operating the excavator. By afternoon, the foundation trenches were 6 feet deep, and Grandpa's 80-year-old apple trees were mulch. I found his surveying journal in the rubble, leather cover, his careful handwriting from 1961, photographs of the land when it was just prairie and dreams. Pages torn, spine cracked, covered in mud and diesel stains. I sat there on a dirt pile holding that journal, and I felt the same rage I'd felt at my wife's funeral, watching something irreplaceable get destroyed by people who don't even understand what they're killing. That night I sat in the dark farmhouse, didn't bother with lights, just listened to silence. My wife's voice came back to me from one of her bad days near the end. Chemo's so rough she could barely whisper. "You're the guy who fixes things everyone says are broken for good, Mitch. Don't forget that." I made my decision right there in the dark. This wasn't about stopping construction. This was about burning down Darlene's entire scam and making damn sure she never did it to another person. My neighbor Hap, 70-year-old rancher, chews tobacco like it's medicinal, called that night. Said he'd been watching through binoculars all day. That Lexus lady showed up in heels at a construction site. City folk got no sense. I almost laughed. Almost. I hired a property attorney the next morning because spite only gets you so far before you need someone fluent in legal. Elena Vasquez showed up in a Tesla that made my Ford look like a lawn ornament, mid-40s, sharp as a knife, reputation for making opposing counsel cry. We walked the property line while she took photos of the construction, and I watched her flip through my deed versus the HOA's fraudulent filing without saying a word. Finally, she stopped near where Grandpa's orchard used to be and said, "This is the most brazen land fraud I've seen in 18 years. We'll win." I felt hope for exactly 3 seconds before she added, "But the injunction hearing's 3 weeks out. They'll finish construction and start selling before we ever see a judge." My stomach dropped. "So we're screwed?" Elena smiled, and it wasn't friendly. "In traditional court, yes. Lucky for you, I'm not traditional." Back at my farmhouse over coffee that tasted like burnt ambition, she explained something I'd never heard of. Lis pendens, Latin for suit pending. Basically a legal hand grenade you file with the county when property's under litigation. Doesn't stop construction, she said, pulling out her laptop, but it poisons the title so badly no bank will touch a mortgage and no buyer will risk their money. "Think of it like this," she said, typing while talking. "They can build all the condos they want, but if nobody can buy them, what's the point?" She filed the lawsuit and lis pendens right there at my kitchen table before her coffee went cold. First genuinely good news since this started. I should have known Darlene would respond like a cornered animal. 2 days later, she showed up at my door. I filmed everything on my phone, learned that lesson already, and watched her perform. Designer yoga pants, fake concern radiating like cheap perfume, voice dripping sympathy. "Mitch, this lawsuit is embarrassing. For you. Our development brings jobs, tax revenue, progress. You're blocking all that over sentimentality?" I kept the phone steady. "It's my land, Darlene. Clear title since 1961. She sighed like I was a child refusing medicine. "We have $4.2 million invested. You have a falling down farmhouse and memories. Who do you think the judge believes?" Then she handed me an envelope and walked away without waiting for an answer. Inside was a counter lawsuit. $500,000 for tortious interference with contract, claiming my lis pendens scared off buyers and cost them sales. I sat on my porch reading legal threats in 90-degree heat, and the math suddenly made sense. This wasn't about being right. This was about who could afford to keep fighting longer. Elena called it a war of attrition when I sent her the filing. "They're betting you'll run out of money before they run out of lawyers, Mitch. Most people do." Her voice was matter of fact, like she'd seen this playbook 100 times. But I had something Darlene didn't count on. Free time, stubbornness, and a dead wife who taught me quitting is just dying in slow motion. I spent 4 days at the public library. My home internet moves like a glacier with arthritis, digging through business records and news archives. Found the pattern on day 3. Pritchett Properties LLC had pulled this scam before. Nevada, Arizona, Texas, 4 projects, all featuring boundary disputes that mysteriously resolved in Randall's favor after original owners ran out of legal funds. In Nevada, a couple named Mike and Carol Brennan lost their family ranch in 2021. The local paper ran a human interest piece about elderly ranchers forced out by development. Tragic but inevitable, the article said, like it was weather. I tracked down Mike's number through the reporter who wrote the story. Called him on a Tuesday, and when he answered, he sounded hollowed out, voice shaky. I explained who I was, what was happening. Long silence on his end. Then I heard him say off phone, "Carol, it's that man from Colorado." When he came back, he was crying. "Son, don't let them win. They took our ranch, our savings. Carol had a stroke from the stress. We lost everything because we couldn't afford the appeal. Don't let them do this again," I promised him, voice thick, sitting alone in the library with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I wasn't just going to beat them. I was going to burn their operation down so publicly they'd never work in real estate again. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about Mike and Carol, how they'd fought this exact fight and lost, how Darlene probably never thought about them at all. Around 2 a.m., Hap texted, "Old ranchers don't sleep much, says darkness is wasted on dreaming." His message, "Construction sites lit up. They're working nights now. Greedy bastards don't even rest." I texted back 5 words, "Neither do I. Game on." Darlene went nuclear on a Thursday. I woke up to 17 missed calls and a text from Hap. Check the newspaper. The Pinewood Springs Gazette, our local paper that usually covers bake sales and whether the high school football team is still terrible, ran a full op-ed by Darlene. Headline, "Selfish landowner blocks community progress." I read it standing in my kitchen, coffee going cold, feeling my jaw clench tighter with every sentence. She'd painted me as a bitter recluse hoarding land while families desperately needed housing, mentioned my wife's death as evidence of mental decline, suggested grief had made me irrational. The kicker quote, Mr. Kowalski's nostalgia for the past shouldn't prevent 28 families from having homes. 28 families, like she was building homeless shelters instead of $500,000 vacation condos. The article hit Facebook by noon and went viral in that specific small-town way where everyone suddenly becomes a property law expert. I made the mistake of reading comments during lunch, lost my appetite immediately. Strangers with profile pictures of their dogs had strong opinions about my mental health, my land management, my right to breathe oxygen. One genius suggested eminent domain to take my property for the greater good. Another, maybe if he moved on from his dead wife, he'd stop being such an asshole. I closed the laptop before I put my fist through the screen. That afternoon at the hardware store, the owner, Dale, sold me lumber for 10 years, always friendly, wouldn't make eye contact. Can't take sides, Mitch. It's business. I paid for my fence posts in cash and left. At the coffee shop next morning, a woman I'd never met stopped at my table. Yoga mat, Lululemon everything, that aggressive kindness that's really just judgment with a smile. You're blocking those condos? My daughter needs affordable housing. I started explaining it was fraud, my land, forged documents. She walked away mid-sentence like I'd tried to sell her a timeshare. For the first time since my wife died, I felt truly isolated. Not lonely, I'd learned to live with that, but isolated, like the town had voted me off the island without mentioning it. Elena called that night. Write a response, set the record straight. I wrote 800 words, detailed, factual, documented. The newspaper editor, Tim, nervous guy who admitted Randall bought half-page ads every month, published 3 sentences that made me sound defensive and paranoid. Elena's advice? Stop playing defense. We go on offense and we go public. I remembered something from my engineering days about construction bonds. Every developer posts insurance in case title gets contested, supposed to protect buyers if ownership goes sideways. Standard practice, ironclad protection, except when developers cheap out. I had Elena's paralegal Trevor dig into Pritchett's paperwork. Took him 2 days of calls and database searches, but he found the crack in the foundation. Title insurance through a shell company that barely existed, bonded through an account in the Caymans with maybe 10% of the required funds. Translation: if those condos couldn't sell because the land was stolen, buyers would lose everything, insurance wouldn't cover it, and Randall would face personal liability that would bankrupt 3 generations of Pritchetts. I smiled for the first time in a week. Sometimes the best weapon is just watching someone hang themselves with their own cheap rope. I decided to attend the HOA meeting. Legally open to the public, though they never advertise it. Found the details through Gwen, retired teacher who'd actually read my liability notice. 7 p.m. Community Center. I showed up early, sat in back, watched 40 confused homeowners file in, wondering why attendance was suddenly mandatory. Darlene ran it like a revival meeting. Power blazer, television smile, handing out reassurance like campaign candy. Our beautiful expansion will increase property values dramatically. Mr. Kowalski's frivolous lawsuit will be dismissed shortly. Our attorney's guarantee will prevail. I raised my hand during Quanda. Every head swiveled toward me like I'd announced a fire. Mrs. Pritchett, how are you claiming adverse possession when Willow Creek didn't exist until 2019? Silence thick enough to choke on. Darlene's smile cracked at the corners. You're misunderstanding complex legal nuances. Next question. But 2 residents were already whispering, phones out, Googling, seed planted. In a room full of people whose home equity was on the line, doubt spreads like mold. Week later, all 4 truck tires slashed. Clean cuts, professional looking, $200 in damage, no witnesses. That same afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox, printed, untraceable. Drop the lawsuit, or we dig into your past. I don't have a past unless you count 3 speeding tickets, and that time I accidentally stole a shopping cart in college, but the message was clear. They were cornered, desperate, and dangerous. My wife used to say desperate people make the best enemies because they stop pretending to be civilized. She was right. I called Elena. Whatever we're doing, we do it faster. They're panicking. I couldn't sleep. 2 a.m., lying in bed staring at ceiling cracks that looked like a roadmap to nowhere, brain running laps through legal arguments and bankruptcy scenarios. Gave up, went to the attic where it smelled like old wood and forgotten decades, started going through Grandpa's boxes for the 3rd time because insomnia makes you either crazy or thorough. Old tax returns, receipts for a tractor that died during the Reagan administration, A Polaroid of Grandpa and Grandma on their wedding day looking impossibly young. Then I spotted the metal lockbox wedged behind a stack of National Geographics from the 70s. Small thing, shoebox-sized, combination lock so rusted I had to hit it twice before it opened. Inside, original 1961 deed, survey maps with Grandpa's penciled notes, and a letter I'd never seen. County letterhead, dated October 12, 1998, addressed to Stanley Kowalski. My hands started shaking before I even finished the first paragraph. The letter confirmed that when Willow Creek Estates was initially proposed back in early planning, the developer requested a boundary modification to access the water main running along my property. Grandpa refused in writing. The county reviewed everything, sided with him, kept the 1961 boundary intact. The key sentence, I can still recite it, was, "Boundary reviewed and certified as recorded. Request for modification denied. Matter resolved." Signed by the county planning director, notarized, official as death. I sat down hard on an old trunk, dust swirling in the dim light from my phone flashlight, and understood what I was holding. This wasn't just evidence. This was a tactical nuke. Darlene's entire fraud rested on claiming a 1998 plat error that needed correction. This letter proved the county had officially reviewed and confirmed the boundary in 1998. No error, no ambiguity, no confusion. She hadn't made a mistake. She'd lied to a judge in filed court documents about something the county had explicitly resolved 27 years ago. That's not regular fraud where you argue over interpretations. That's fraud on the court, lying in legal filings, forging narratives, the kind of thing that gets lawyers disbarred and defendants sanctioned into bankruptcy. I scanned the letter at 3 a.m. on my prehistoric printer that sounds like a dying robot, emailed it to Elena with the subject line, "Grandpa's insurance policy." She replied in 40 seconds, "When do we file this?" I called her. "We don't. Not yet." Silence on her end then. "Explain before I drive up there and shake you." I told her the plan. Sit on it. Let them commit to their lies under oath at the injunction hearing. Let Darlene and her fancy Miami lawyer testify that no county review ever happened, that the boundary was always disputed and ambiguous. Then, we produce the letter. Trap them in perjury where they can't claim confusion or misunderstanding. One shot, kill shot, no appeals. Elena was quiet long enough that I thought the call dropped. Then she laughed, sharp, delighted. "That's vicious, Mitch. I like it." I thought about my wife during her last round of chemo, too weak to walk but still doing crossword puzzles because she refused to let cancer take her mind before her body. She taught me, you don't show strength when you're strong, you show it when everyone thinks you're beaten. We hung up with the plan locked in. By that weekend, construction hit 60% complete. Darlene hosted a pre-sale open house, illegal as hell with a clouded title, but she was betting on crushing me in court. Local news ran a puff piece. I watched her on my laptop, confident and glowing, talking about community vision and progress. I smiled at the screen, actually smiled, because she had no idea the noose was already around her neck. She just hadn't noticed it tightening yet. Elena drove up 3 days later with her paralegal Trevor in tow. Kid couldn't be older than 25, nervous energy, laptop bag heavier than he was. We turned my kitchen table into a war room, documents everywhere, coffee mugs breeding like rabbits, Elena's legal pads covered in diagrams that looked like NFL playbooks. The whole place smelled like strong coffee and tactical revenge. Hap wandered in around noon carrying homemade apple pie, surveyed the chaos, and deadpanned, "Y'all planning D-Day or just suing some assholes?" Elena didn't look up from her notes. "Why not both? That pie better have ice cream." We built the attack in 4 layers, each designed to hit the Pritchett's from a different direction simultaneously. Elena called it the scorched earth doctrine. If we're burning them down, we burn it so completely they can't rebuild anywhere else. Layer 1 was the courtroom kill shot. At the injunction hearing, we'd let their attorney Sheldon Krause testify about the supposed 1998 plat error, let him commit under oath in front of a judge, then drop Grandpa's letter like a bomb, demand sanctions for fraud on the court, move to dismiss their entire case with prejudice so they can't refile it in another county or appeal it into oblivion. The risk was the judge might let them amend their story, but Elena figured we had strong odds of immediate victory plus a court order forcing them to pay our legal fees. Revenge that pays for itself, she called it. Layer 2 was financial strangulation, and this is where Trevor proved his worth. He'd been spelunking through public records and found that Randall's construction loan came from a private equity firm, personally guaranteed, due in 90 days, payments dependent on condo pre-sales. But you can't legally sell condos with a clouded title. Elena filed a motion to freeze all pre-sale money in escrow until the title dispute resolved. Freeze the money, Randall defaults on the loan, private equity accelerates the debt and seizes everything. We could bankrupt him without even winning the case just by choking his cash flow until he drowned. Layer 3 was media napalm. Jamal Wright had spent 2 weeks tracking down every person the Pritchetts had screwed in 4 different states. Mike and Carol in Nevada, a family farm in Arizona, retired military couple in Texas. He'd interviewed them all on camera, documented the pattern. His investigative piece was scheduled to air 2 days after our court hearing, perfectly timed, so the legal win amplified the media exposure. National news outlets were already sniffing around the story. Elena said once you get labeled a serial land fraud developer on television, you're done. Nobody touches you. Banks won't loan, contractors won't work, buyers won't trust. Professional death by broadcast journalism. Layer 4 was turning the HOA against itself from the inside. We drafted notices to every member explaining that board members could face personal liability for the association's debts. If they lost this fight, homeowners might see special assessments of $10,000 or $20,000 each to cover damages and legal fees. I personally delivered copies to 15 houses, targeting people with kids or tight budgets, folks who couldn't afford a financial surprise. Gwen, the retired teacher, called me that same night. She was organizing an emergency vote to remove Darlene from the board, but needed 60% approval, and Darlene controlled proxy votes from absentee snowbird owners. We were working on flipping those. Trevor also discovered something beautiful that made me actually laugh for the first time in weeks. Construction contractors can file mechanics' liens if they don't get paid, and those liens stick to the property itself like legal herpes. If Randall went bankrupt, contractors would lose their money, but they could recover by liening other HOA assets. Elena anonymously tipped the concrete company that was owed $180 grand. Let them get nervous. Let them start demanding payment Randall couldn't afford. Sometimes the best strategy is just handing people loaded guns and watching them shoot in the right direction. We'd also found permit fraud. Randall had pulled permits claiming this was HOA common area development, which skips environmental review and costs less. Actually, building condos for sale requires stricter permits. Elena tipped county building inspectors. Even if they just issued temporary stop work orders, every day of delay cost Randall thousands in equipment rental and idle crews. Financial bleeding from a dozen small cuts. By the time we finished planning, it was full dark outside, kitchen looking like a tornado hit a law library. Elena stretched, joints popping, said what I was already thinking. Even if we somehow lose in court, which we won't, the financial and media pressure alone destroys them. I thought about Mike crying on the phone about his lost ranch, about Grandpa's trees mulched into nothing, about how many people these parasites had crushed because they could afford meaner lawyers. I don't want to just destroy them, I said. Elena raised an eyebrow. I smiled for real this time. I want them erased. A cautionary tale parents tell their kids about what happens when you steal. 10 days before the hearing, my well pump died. Woke up, tried the kitchen sink, got nothing but air coughing through pipes like an asthmatic smoker. Plumber Rick came out that afternoon, took 40 minutes to diagnose, and when he climbed back up from the well, his face told me everything. Someone poured sand down the casing, deliberate, probably at night, destroyed the motor, contaminated the whole system. He wiped his hands on a rag that smelled like mineral deposits and bad news. $8,000 to fix, Mitch, and I can't prove anything, but this wasn't an accident. I stood there in my yard doing the math, knowing exactly who did it, knowing I'd never prove it in any court that mattered. Darlene showed up 2 days later. I filmed everything on my phone. Pattern recognition is a survival skill, and this time she'd dropped the act entirely. No athleisure, no fake concern, just a gray blazer and eyes like a loan shark. Let's cut the crap. $350,000 cash. You sign a quitclaim deed today. Lawsuit disappears. I kept the camera steady. That's triple your first offer. You're panicking. She didn't flinch. I'm being generous. Sheldon will bury you in discovery costs. $100 grand in legal fees before trial, and you'll lose because judges don't care about dead wives and sentimental orchards. The dead wife comment hit like a fist, but I kept my voice level. Counteroffer, halt construction, admit fraud publicly, pay damages. She laughed, sharp, joyless. You're insane. We do this the hard way then. She stopped on my porch steps, turned back. Small-town heroes don't beat people like us, Mitch. We have resources you can't imagine. I watched her Lexus disappear down my driveway in a cloud of dust and thought how wrong she was. Resources don't win. Desperation and refusing to quit do. The smear went nuclear the next day. Some blogger, WordPress journalist with delusions of relevance, published a story claiming I was under investigation for unpaid property taxes, total fabrication. My taxes were current to the penny, but it spread on Facebook like mold, and suddenly I was the deadbeat blocking progress. Dale at the hardware store asked me about it, voice careful, like I might be contagious. Everything okay financially? I showed him my paid receipts on my phone, but I could see doubt lingering behind his eyes. Lies are like stains. Even when you prove they're false, something remains. But cracks were forming in Darlene's empire. 3 HOA members contacted me privately: Gwen, a young contractor named Marcus, and a retired accountant named Phil. They'd been digging through county records after my performance at the meeting. None of Darlene's story checked out. Gwen was organizing an emergency vote to remove the board, but bylaws required 60%, and Darlene controlled proxy votes from 15 snowbird owners who lived in Arizona half the year. Democracy rigged by fine print. Then county building inspectors hit the construction site like federal agents. Elena's anonymous tip had landed perfectly. They found the permit fraud, residential condos filed as common area development to skip environmental review, plus wetland encroachment, improper electrical, missing fire suppression plans. Issued a stop work order on site. Hap called me 10 minutes later, breathless with schadenfreude. Randall's down there screaming at inspectors, turned purple like a grape in a microwave. They told him he's lucky they ain't ordering full demolition. The construction site went silent by afternoon. No machinery, no crews, just skeletal condo frames and vindication hanging in the air. Darlene had a meltdown on Facebook, posted a rant about vindictive bureaucrats destroying affordable housing because of one bitter man's refusal to accept progress. Tagged the county, the governor called it corruption. Comment section turned on her like wolves, people asking why she filed wrong permits, whether she actually owned the land, how much profit she'd personally make. Someone posted her property records showing a 7-figure payday from condo sales. She deleted everything within an hour, but I'd screenshot it all. You can't unring bells, especially digital ones. That night, Elena called. Kraus filed a motion to delay the hearing 60 days, claims he needs more discovery time. My chest tightened. Can they stall forever? Her voice stayed steady. Not with what we have, but we need one more move, something they can't counter. I thought about it, staring at Grandpa's surveying journal on my kitchen table. What if we go public before the hearing? Give Jamal the 1998 letter now instead of after. Force Darlene to respond in the media where she can't hide behind lawyers. Elena was quiet for 5 seconds. That's risky. Shows our hand early. I said, they already know they're losing. Let's make them lose publicly. She laughed, surprised. You're learning. Call Jamal tomorrow. I hung up and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope exactly, but momentum. The kind that comes right before you stop defending and start destroying. The courtroom smelled like old wood polish and nervous sweat. County Courthouse, 9 a.m., Judge Helena Brandt presiding, 60-something, steel gray hair, reputation for eating unprepared lawyers for breakfast. I sat between Elena and Trevor at the plaintiff table, watching Sheldon Kraus arrange his $1,000 briefcase like he was directing a cologne commercial. Randall wore a suit that cost more than my annual property taxes, and Darlene sat rigid beside him, makeup not quite hiding the sleepless nights. The gallery was half full, Jamal with his notebook, Gwen and 2 HOA members, Hap in clean overalls that still smelled like tobacco, the building inspector who'd shut their site down. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. Kraus opened smooth as expensive whiskey, voice calibrated for maximum authority. The boundary dispute was genuine, he claimed, decades of confusion, conflicting surveys, innocent mistakes. The HOA acted in good faith based on professional opinions. He presented Boundary Pro's survey with highlighted sections and technical jargon that sounded impressive if you didn't know it was bullshit. Painted me as an obstinate man clinging to technicalities while blocking community progress. Judge Brandt listened stone-faced, taking notes, occasionally glancing at me like she was calculating whether I was victim or nuisance. Elena stood and dismantled him with surgical precision, presented Boundary Pro's licensing records. Surveyor wasn't even licensed in this state until 2003. Couldn't have reviewed any 1998 plat because he was legally unqualified. Physical impossibility. She showed my surveyor's report from a 30-year professional confirming the 1961 boundary with GPS accuracy, introduced aerial photos proving the line never moved. Judge Brandt's expression shifted, interest sharpening behind her reading glasses. Elena asked to call Randall to the stand. Kraus objected, irrelevant to injunction proceedings. Judge Brandt looked at him flatly. I'll allow it. Proceed. Randall got sworn in, settled into the witness chair trying to project confidence, but his jaw muscles were working overtime. Elena kept her voice conversational. Mr. Pritchett, you've testified in filings that the 1998 plat contained a boundary error. How did you discover this? Randall relaxed slightly. Our surveyor found it during expansion due diligence. Elena nodded like that made perfect sense. Did you personally review county records from 1998 about this boundary? Brief hesitation. I saw him sense danger without seeing its source. I relied on professional expertise. Elena's voice stayed level. So you're testifying under oath that to your knowledge, the county never officially resolved this boundary question in 1998? Randall glanced at Kraus, got a microscopic nod. Correct. It was unresolved. Elena walked to our table, picked up a single document. The courtroom seemed to stop breathing. Your Honor, Exhibit G, a letter dated October 12, 1998, from County Planning to Stanley Kowalski, Mr. Kowalski's grandfather. She distributed copies. I watched Kraus's face drain like someone pulled a plug, watched his hand shake as he read. Elena let the silence build. This letter explicitly confirms the boundary was officially reviewed in 1998 after a developer requested modification. The county certified it as recorded, denied the modification, and, quote, matter resolved. There was no error. There never was. The silence felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Judge Brandt read the letter twice, her expression hardening from granite to diamond. She looked at Randall, still sitting in the witness box. Mr. Pritchett, you just testified under oath to facts contradicted by a government document from 27 years ago. Her voice could freeze fire. That's perjury. Randall opened his mouth and she raised one hand. Counsel, did you review county archives before filing adverse possession? Kraus looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. Your Honor, we relied on client representations and surveyor analysis. Judge Brandt cut him off. So either your client lied or you failed basic due diligence. Which? Darlene shot to her feet, voice breaking. We were told by our surveyor. The judge didn't even glance at her. Sit down immediately or I'll have you removed. Darlene collapsed back into her chair. Judge Brandt reviewed her notes, then delivered the words that ended their world. Preliminary injunction granted permanently. All construction ceases immediately. Adverse possession claim dismissed with prejudice. It cannot be refiled. Show cause hearing in 30 days why the HOA shouldn't pay plaintiff's fees plus sanctions for fraud on the court. I'm referring Mr. Pritchett's testimony to the DA for perjury investigation. She lifted her gavel and brought it down once, sharp as a gunshot. Adjourned. Outside on the courthouse steps, Jamal's camera was already rolling. Mr. Kowalski, how does it feel? I looked straight at the camera, thought about Mike Brennan losing his ranch, about Grandpa's trees turned to mulch, about every person the Pritchetts had crushed. It's not about me, it's about everyone they've done this to, the Nevada couple who lost everything, the next victim they were planning. That stops today. Behind me through the courthouse doors, I glimpsed Darlene and Randall leaving through a side exit, refusing to answer questions, looking smaller somehow. Hap appeared at my elbow, chewing tobacco, voice dry as desert wind. Well, that was more entertaining than anything on Netflix. I almost laughed. Almost. Still had work to do. The Willow Creek Community Center looked like a pressure cooker about to explode. Emergency HOA meeting, 7 p.m., 5 days post-hearing. 95 homeowners crammed into a room built for 60. Air conditioning wheezing like an asthmatic trying to keep up. Everything smelled like stress sweat and coffee that had been burning since breakfast. I sat in back as Elena's guest, watching people file in with faces ranging from confused to homicidal. Darlene sat at the board table looking like she'd aged 10 years in 5 days. No makeup, hair unwashed, blazer wrinkled like she'd slept in it. Outside, news cameras were setting up because Jamal's investigative report had aired 2 nights ago and turned this into actual news. Phil the treasurer opened with financial apocalypse. HOA faced $180 in contractor liens, $85,000 in legal bills, potential $200,000 in court sanctions, plus special assessment of $4,100 per household. The room detonated, overlapping shouts, someone yelling, "Are you fucking kidding me?" A woman in front crying because they just bought their house. Phil tried restoring order, gave up, just shouted over the chaos. "This is what happens when nobody watches the people in charge." Darlene made her last stand, voice shaking. "This is temporary. We tried to increase your property values. One selfish neighbor and a biased judge." Gwen shot to her feet so fast her chair screamed across the floor. "Stop! Just stop lying to us. You told us the land was ours. I read the court transcript. You committed fraud." Marcus, the contractor, stood next. "My family's entire savings is in this house. You destroyed our equity with your illegal bullshit." Darlene's mouth opened, and nothing came out. First time I'd ever seen her speechless. Phil grew a spine right there in real time. "I reviewed the books. Darlene, you authorized $140,000 in legal fees without board approval. Bylaws require majority vote over 25 grand. You violated our own rules and gambled with our money." Darlene tried speaking, voice cracking. "I had presidential authority." Phil cut her off cold. "No, you didn't. You went rogue." The room buzzed with angry realization. Their leader had bet their homes on a scam. Someone shouted from the middle, "Kowalski's here! Let him talk!" Heads swiveled. Some hostile stares, but mostly exhausted desperation. I stood, felt Elena's hand briefly touch my arm. "I'm not here to gloat," I said. "You're victims like me. The Pritchetts ran this scam in Nevada, Arizona, Texas. They crushed a retired couple in Nevada who lost their ranch fighting back. Darlene counted on you trusting authority without checking." I paused. "Here's your way out. Vote to remove this board, settle with me officially, formalize the boundary, drop all claims, and I'll ask the judge to waive sanctions against the HOA. Go after the Pritchetts personally, not you." The vote was swift and brutal. Motion to remove entire board. Darlene tried playing her proxy cards from absentee snowbirds. Phil demolished that. "Proxies don't cover removal votes. Robert's rules. They're void. Final count, 87 yes, 4 no, 4 abstain." Darlene sat frozen like she'd been unplugged, then stood and walked out the side door, staring straight ahead, not looking at anyone, trying to make herself invisible through sheer willpower. Outside was a media-feeding frenzy. Jamal's investigation had hit 400,000 views, regional pickup, some national attention. His piece included Mike and Carol Brennan's interview, the 4-state pattern, the 1998 letter, courthouse footage. The clip of me saying "that stops today" was everywhere. 3 news vans waited as homeowners poured out. Someone caught Randall on camera outside his house looking cornered. Reporter: "Did you commit perjury in court?" Randall, sweating: "No comment. Witch hunt. Talk to my surveyor." It became a meme by midnight. Rich guy blaming the help when caught stealing. Next morning, for sale sign on the Pritchett McMansion. Poetic justice so thick you could taste it. Moving trucks arrived by afternoon. Neighbor told Jamal's camera, "They're fleeing like roaches when the lights come on." Darlene never spoke publicly again, just disappeared into whatever witness protection program exists for exposed frauds. Gwen visited my farmhouse a week later with the new interim board. Brought formal settlement papers, HOA drops everything, pays $35,000 for my legal costs, issues public apology. But she also brought something I didn't expect, a brass plaque. "We're installing this at the community center. In honor of neighbors who stand up for what's right. Your name if you'll allow it." My throat went tight, voice rough. "Use my grandfather's name, Stanley Kowalski. He's the one who protected this land first. I just finished his fight." Gwen's eyes got wet. "We'll use both names then." She hugged me before leaving. Quick, hard, the kind that says thank you when words aren't enough. I stood on my porch afterward watching the sun drop behind the mountains, thinking about how Grandpa would have loved this ending. Justice served, land protected, community healed. The way it should be. 3 weeks later, Judge Brandt's ruling came down like a hammer. Pritchett's personally liable for $127,000 in sanctions, non-dischargeable even in bankruptcy, meaning they couldn't wipe it away by claiming poverty. Randall's empire collapsed within a week. Pritchett Properties filed Chapter 11. Assets liquidated at auction like they were having a going-out-of-business sale on fraud. The half-built condo site sold to a legitimate developer who dismantled the frames and restored the land to prairie grass and wildflowers. Watching those skeletal structures come down felt like watching a tumor get removed. Sheldon Krause faced bar investigations in 3 states, eventually suspended for 18 months. Boundary Pro Inc. lost licenses across the West after regulators found the same scam in a dozen other projects. The whole machine dismantled, piece by satisfying piece. Darlene and Randall fled to Florida. Word was Randall worked for his brother-in-law's property management now, supervising maintenance crews instead of stealing land. Darlene disappeared from social media completely, became a digital ghost. I didn't celebrate their suffering, I'm not that guy, but I sure as hell celebrated them never victimizing another person. Prevention beats revenge every time. I paid Elena in full with the settlement money. She tried refusing the last 15 grand, called it pro bono justice work. I insisted. You earned every penny, especially that moment when Krause's face went white. She laughed and cashed the check. 6 months post-victory, I hosted a barbecue for everyone who'd helped. 60 people showed up. Hap, Gwen, Phil, Marcus, Jamal, Elena, Trevor, even Diane from County Records. Kids ran through fields where bulldozers used to tear earth. A bluegrass band played under the pines, and the air smelled like grilled meat and fresh-cut grass and something that felt suspiciously like hope. Hap got uncharacteristically emotional watching it all. Your wife would be damn proud, Mitch. I had to look away, throat tight. Yeah, she always knew I was stubborn enough to see things through. The land became Kowalski Conservation Meadow, nonprofit community space, 47 acres for everyone. 12 acres preserved as native prairie for pollinators. 30 community garden plots leased cheap to families who needed them. Small amphitheater built by volunteers with Hap cracking jokes about his carpentry being good enough for folk music. Educational trail explaining local ecology plus property rights, teaching people to spot scams and protect themselves. Elementary classes visited for field trips. Watching kids learn that standing up to powerful bullies actually works. That made every sleepless night worthwhile. I established the Stanley Kowalski Land Stewardship Scholarship, $5,000 annually for students studying environmental science, engineering, or law. First recipient was Marcus's daughter, who wanted to be an environmental lawyer. Marcus cried at the town hall presentation. You turned our nightmare into my daughter's dream. I shook her hand and told her what I wished someone had told me earlier. Laws exist to protect the powerless, not enable the powerful, but only if people are willing to fight. She looked at me with that fierce determination that actually changes the world and said, I won't forget. I believed her. The annual harvest at Kowalski Meadow became tradition. First year drew 800 people, vendors, food trucks, live music, families on picnic blankets. I gave a short speech at opening, uncomfortable with the microphone but needing to say it. This land was almost stolen through fraud. Instead, it's ours, everyone's. That's the ending corruption doesn't get to write when people refuse to quit. The applause rolled across the meadow like thunder, and I finally understood what Grandpa meant about land having plans. Willow Creek HOA transformed completely under Gwen. Bylaws rewritten, transparency required, homeowner votes mandatory. Other communities copied their model. Gwen told reporters, we learned that unchecked power always goes bad. Check it. Every time. I planted a new apple sapling where the orchard used to be, buried a box at its roots, my wife's favorite poem, Grandpa's photo, page from his journal, stood there alone in afternoon light and said quietly, they tried erasing our history. Instead, they taught me why it matters. That evening, my phone rang. Woman from Montana, voice shaking. I saw your story. City council's taking my ranch through eminent domain for private development. They're lying about public use. I don't know what to do. I smiled, opened a fresh notebook. Start from the beginning. Tell me everything. Because there's always another fight, another person who needs someone to stand with them against the powerful. And I'd learned the most important lesson. You don't need to be the biggest or richest. You just need to refuse to stop. Look, if you fought HOA tyrants, corrupt officials, or anyone trying to steal what's yours, drop your story below. You're not alone, and your silence is exactly what they're counting on. Let's change that. Subscribe because next week's story is wild. A small-town librarian who bankrupted an entire city council using nothing but their own bylaws and 20 years of patience. The revenge is surgical. You need to see this. Drone shot over the meadow at golden hour. Families in gardens, kids on trails, music floating from the amphitheater. Pan to me on the farmhouse porch with coffee, watching mountains turn gold in the sunset. Sometimes the fight isn't just about winning. It's about making damn sure they can't do it to the next person.
We appreciate you spending your time with us on HOA Stories, where HOA Karens finally get checked. If you enjoyed today's drama, hit like, comment on your favorite part below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be the first to catch our next HOA Showdown.